So, hey guys, today we're going to be talking about the issues with generic engines. So, we'll go with an ancient one that people used to kind of do. So, you have Christian Hulky Fibrax. So, every single rogue deck at one point, basically, not just necessarily every rogue deck, but just like a crap ton of decks that ran Hulk, all of their end boards looked pretty much identical. So, you have some sort of boss monster. Maybe you don't even have that, like with Malefic. You might not end with a guy, or maybe your guy just legitimately does nothing. But alright, the end board, essentially, if you don't include Auroradon necessarily even, it usually somehow ends up being like, you have a Borload Savage for whatever reason. Couldn't tell you why, but you just have a Borload Savage Dragon, okay? And then Crystron Hulky Fibrax is going to then, well, it depends, but we can go Hulk to Special Summon, and it'll probably be like Formula. And then you go Formula plus Borload Savage into Baron for 2 Omni Negates plus 1 draw. And this is kind of just the end board. Like, I don't even have to say what end board it is, because if you were playing a deck with Falcon, you were doing something similar to this essentially, where you going Formula into Baron, and then you also have Borload Savage on the field that you made with whatever tuner you summoned off of Hulk, because that's just what you would do. In fact, I think this is literally part of like a dinosaur end board as well as like a billion other end boards, honestly. But yeah, this is just what you did. Okay, but now let's pull up a modern archetype. Whoa, Beansmith. Well, this doesn't account for like Auroradon, which ends on something else, but you know, it's the same kind of idea still. But okay, let's go here instead. We make Moon, we go Requiem, yada yada, and now we basically go sequence Lacrima. Lacrima brings back, it'll probably be Engraver, right? And then you make Wave King. Bro, this is doing literally the same kind of thing, but even better. So with Moon going into like sequence and then going into Caesar, this is like literally the same amount of interruptions as like Hulk dropping down the Baron plus the Borload Savage. Believe it or not. So that's a thing. Anyone knows that? And you're just dropping Wave High King Caesar. You just convert any 2 guys essentially into Wave High King Caesar or whatever else. So technically you could have made Apollosa as well, off of all the materials here. That'd be like, I don't know, a 3-4 mat Apollosa, depending on how you do it exactly, I believe. I'm pretty certain about 3, 4. Might depend on the hand, honestly, but you know, it depends. But you know, this is even more generic than Hulk, because this at least required a tuner. So if we look through like all the modern archetypes, a lot of these guys don't even have access to a tuner. Just throwing that out there. It's just like at some point Synchro was by far the best mechanic at the time, around when Master Duel was just first released, I guess. We had a long period of where synchros were just dominant. So yeah, I mean, Hulk would, of course, being kind of like synchro kind of support in general. Yeah, it was going to be kind of just played a lot, I guess. That's the expectation. But it's not like you were going to make this in necessarily every synchro deck. Like, Sword Soul didn't really make this, but the 10E piles that played Adventure definitely made this into Auroradon, which is kind of a different category of deck, I would say, but sure, whatever. Essentially, you know, same kind of deal. You're just generically dropping down a boss monster like this in like kind of every single deck. So let's say I'm playing Skull Servants. I can randomly then just go Moon, and then I drop a Wave High King Caesar. Let's say I'm playing Malice. Well, okay, I can just grab like Engraver and stuff and kind of just drop this. I can even go like Terror Top first before going into my Mouse Blaze, going into like a I guess Moon. You know, like Tear Top, special summon Takatomborg, go into Moon, and then go like Wave Hiking Caesar. That's possible. You can also do this with technically the Millennium stuff, just dropping two guys on the field, two, three, whichever you prefer, I guess. And then boom, we have Wave Hiking Caesar, and also you have some follow up with the Fiendsmith Engraver being potentially removal or an extra body on the following turn as well. Which Hell didn't really have a follow play. It was just like you ride or die with this Baron and this Borlord Savage, which if they're dealt with, that's the board dealt with. So you could even realistically call like Fiendsmith the modern day Hulk. But I don't know, just for some reason, I feel like people don't hate Fiendsmith as much as Christian Halki Fibrax, which is just like wild. Because, you know, this is even more generically accessible. Like, what? Okay. And then now we have Mitsurugi, which is basically like the main deck equivalent of this type of thing where you drop some more generic nonsense. And somehow, generic nonsense, it all ends up being kind of same. So at this point in time, you could just slap Mitsurugi plus Fiendsmith into any deck. I mean, the end board would end up looking the same, but you could definitely do this, right? So let's see. For example, what is a deck we could do this for that would make just a little bit of sense? Let's see. A lot of legacy cards showing up here. Kind of want to look for an actual archetype though. Keep going. It just has to be something without like a serious lock like Branded pretty much. So yeah, let's say Ninja. We'll do Ninja. So yeah, Ninja, your combo's like essentially normal summon Hanzo. Hanzo grabs you like, I don't know, Dancing Leaves. Dancing Leaves tags out for Hanzo for Geo. And that's essentially the combo, right? But okay, let's say we want to do a combo with this instead. We can go into, I guess, we can go like Engraver, or we can start Habakiri, and then we can go into Moon later off of Habakiri, so we still do like Fiendsmith stuff, make like the Wave Hiking Caesar, Apollosa, whichever, and then we can, I guess, do both the Mitsurugi stuff and the Fiendsmith stuff, and then we just normal summon Hanzo, grab Dancing Leaves and pass. Hell, we could do the equivalent of this with like Vanquish Soul as well, where we just normal summon Rasen and kind of like just add Borger, draw one, and then pass on like Rock of the Vanquisher plus all of the Fiendsmith stuff plus the Mitsurugi stuff. And you know, every deck could just be played like this, but why? So generic stuff, I think. The issue here is that the stuff is too damn generic. If it were like more, at least even if it were generic, if it were more like focused on a niche, like a generic niche kind of card, if that makes sense. Like, this card's pretty strong, right? But not every deck is literally making Romulus to add Dragon Ravine, because this requires you to. This is only generically ish playable in like Dragon and or Wing Beast stacks, right? So you're not going to make like Romulus if you're playing necessarily even Blue Eyes, let alone something like Malice. You're not dropping Romulus in Malice, right? But Romulus is still a good card, and it's fine, right? But with something like a Moon, you can literally drop this before going into Malice plays for no reason whatsoever. And how even, right? You still needed to find a tuner or drop some tuner access at some point somewhere, and then you would still need the correct levels and whatnot, but then, and only then, would you drop like the Warlord Savage plus the Baron. But now it's like any two bodies for whatever reason. All right, now it goes into Moon, just because. Like why? Why though? So for example, like let's say you're playing against Tearlament, this deck, disgusting for so many reasons, but let's say you have Rhinoheart plus Sheeran, or not even. We can have it even worse. Let's say you have Rhinoheart plus like Fenrir. Link off both of those, go into Moon, and then you do like some Fiendsmith nonsense, go into like Pilgrim Reaper or Wave High King Caesar. It doesn't really matter. The fact that you can do that is absolutely dumb. And then there's also like the idea that you could also go into Mitsurugi with these cards to just trigger things and do things with Assault, and go into Fiendsmith to do stuff like Pilgrim Reaper. And then try to mill like a tier card and call that Synergy or a Tearlament deck, and it's like, really? A Tearlament deck with like 1/4 Tearlament or less? Insane. Why bother playing the Tearlament cards at all at this point? Just throw in some hand traps instead. Like, what? The Tearlament cards don't really add much to that deck, but that's kind of how those could be played, right? At the moment, though, I think Tearlament is played with, like, Gem Knight plus Beansmith. Just like, really? Really, really? Absolutely hate that, but yeah, it is what it is. Not like they have Tearlament cards left to play, so I mean, that's a little bit more like reasonable. Like you don't have a choice in that regard, but I mean, even if you did have a choice, you'd probably be doing the same thing anyways. So just like, why bother playing archetypal cards? Just play completely generic ones, because these don't do anything apparently. Because all you're going to be doing is apparently going into like sequence, Moon, whatever, making like Caesar, and then doing some like Mitsurugi combo nonsense, and then maybe doing your play. At this point, like, whatever archetype you were supposed to be supporting with those guys, like, they're not getting supported by those guys anymore. These guys are the deck, and your archetype is basically just also there. So yeah, absolutely hate this, and it feels like they're way too damn generic for literally zero reason, right? Why can I access everything from this? So to really drive it home, you can even go from Fiendsmith to Mitsurugi, because you have like the ability to make a rank 4 from just like Moon going into sequence. So essentially from just sequence, you can make a rank 4 to then go into Mitsurugi by going into King of the Feral Imps. And then from starting with the Mitsurugi cards, you just have enough bodies to make Moon, and then you just go into Fiendsmith stuff. So at this point, even your generic engines can generically play the generic engines. And your archetypal ones are just, they exist, I guess. They could go into the generic ones, but why do you have to specifically be using this generic engine, right? Or this archetypal engine to access the generics? You could be using anything. It's just like a different flavor at this point. It's like still vanilla, but it's a slightly different color of vanilla, I guess, It's still the same damn thing. You're basically still playing Fiendsmith Mitsurugi. Like, what is this even? That is to say, I guess, I am not a very big fan of these decks, these strategies. They're all monotonous. They're the same. They do like the exact same combo lines, play the exact same. Their board is literally the exact same, because you're using all the same monsters, all the same extra deck pieces. And yeah, it's just terrible, really. And it also kills creativity pretty hard. So it's like, let's say we have this insane deck using, I guess it'll be something like this. This is pretty possible. I've already kind of built this deck before, so I'll just go over the general ideas, where we have like Dark Refer, Danger Nessie, we have the Orcus cards, we have the Zombie World cards, and I can get this to kind of like barely function. So we have like Orcus cards, Zombie World cards, and the idea behind this is we can go like into Distrudo. We can get access to Distrudo with Dark River. We can just send the Orcus cards from our hand or deck to the graveyard as well. And we can get access to Zombie World and Doom King Ballad Rock by going um, Destrudo plus whatever I want to use as kind of like synchro material to make. It'll be Shooting Riser, and then Shooting Riser allows me to send Banshee and also Love Modulate itself, which allows me to then also go into Immortal Dragon, which allows me to send Doom King, and then Doom King will be able to special summon itself because I will have access to the Orcus Field spell actually as well. And because this is on the field, then this requires any field spell. This will just be able to special summon itself, and I can trigger the banish later after I do all my Orcus stuff with Banshee, right? So I can go Banshee effect, trigger Doom King, so chain 1, Banshee, chain 2, Doom King, and then that works. Or if later I do this, I can also use some of my Orcus kind of cards on the field or whatever other cards I have on the field, like IP, to trigger Doom King. And we also have ideas of like, now that Zombie World is on the field, I can just use Doom King's negate as well, the monster negate, and the Orcus cards. I just don't need to cycle them as hard, so I don't even need the field spell anymore. And I'll only really need to use their effects on my own turn, and that would be sufficient enough, I guess. But yeah, that's the general idea here of, well, how I kind of blended Orcus and kind of Zombie World together using like Dark River as one of the primary core cards, uh, revolving kind of around the strategy, right? But you know, instead of this, I could have just played, you know, just Orcus plus Fiendsmith. Why would I bother figuring out all this stuff that could be, you know, who cares if it's better or worse? It's just so easy to just go, oh yeah, throw in Moon, throw in like the Orcus cards. Maybe throw in Mitsurugi if I'm feeling it. Call it a day. Who needs to think, you know? Like, why think of these strategies and all these things? You know, just slapping, slapping Moon, slapping Sequence, slapping Requiem. Cool. That's a deck for sure. Why bother testing things like this, right? Why bother playing, I don't know, Memento plus Altergeist? Yep. This sure is a deck, I guess. Well, yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.